Okay, so this video is going to be of the female reproductive system. I'm going to jump back and forth between lots of models that we had in the lab. Okay, we're going to start out by looking at the ovary. And on this model, the ovary is here. That's where we're going to produce the oocytes. Then they're going to be passed up into the uterine tube, which starts with the fimbriae, and then the infundibulum. And then the majority of the tube is called the isthmus, and it will deliver over here to the uterus. Uterus is a curved pear-shaped organ that has a fundus, a body, and a cervix. Cervix is where we exit the uterus. It's also made of many layers. The outer covering is called the perimetrium. The middle is the muscular layer is the myometrium, and the inner layer is the endometrium. And you should know from lecture that it has a basal layer and a functional layer. The functional layer is shed every month. The exit from the uterus is the cervix, which is like donut with a very tiny hole right here. And then we would exit from the cervix and enter the vagina. This is a ridged tube that leads from the cervix out to the exterior of the woman's body. Now, let's look at what's holding up the uterus. I'm going to change over to this model. So this is a front view, frontal section of the uterus. So I can see my fundus is up here, and my cervix is down here, and you can kind of see what's holding everything up. So here's the ovary, and so from here to here is called the ovarian ligament. Coming out of the other side of the ovary going this way would be the suspensory ligament, and here's my fallopian tube or uterine tubes there. You see there's this large flappy structure here that is called the broad ligament, and then usually coming out of the top along here is the round ligament. That one's kind of hard to see. Okay, so those are the ligaments that support the uterus. Now we're going to stay on this model for a few minutes, and we're going to talk about the ovary. So we take this and we blow it up big, we get this. If we blow it up really big, we get that. Okay, so when looking at the ovary, we can see things like this. This is an egg nest in A that's showing primordial follicles. And then some of them are going to be chosen to become primary follicles, which are represented here by B. You can usually tell because they get a ring of granulosa cells around them. And then we'll start to fill up a little antrum. That will give us a secondary follicle. And then a tertiary follicle, you see the oocyte is here, a large fluid-filled space called the antrum here, and lots of rows of granulosa cells that are going to become the corona radiata around this cell. So you can also look here. So these are my egg nest or primordial, primary follicle. They kind of skip over to tertiary follicle here, and then this is showing ovulation. Now what happens to the follicle after ovulation? I end up with first a corpus luteum, and then a corpus albicans. Looking here, okay, this one, we haven't ovulated yet. Coming over here, this one has ovulated, so here's ovulation, here's corpus luteum, and then these would be transitioning into corpus albicans. Okay, so those are our ovaries and the things we would find on the ovaries. Now let's go over and transition over to the external genitalia of the female, which is here. And this is collectively called the vulva. So we have a mons pubis, which would be here, which would be a large fat pad right on top of the pubic symphysis. So let me show you on this model. Here's my pubic symphysis. This would be the mons pubis. And then right behind the mons pubis, we will start to see the clitoris. Clitoris is here. There is a hood-like structure that's called the prepuce. Then on the female anatomy, the next thing to happen would be a urethral orifice. So let's go back to this model. So here's the clitoris. Then we have a space. Then we have the urethral orifice. And then behind the urethral orifice, we would have the vaginal orifice, which on this model is right here. So surrounding those orifices, we have the labia majora. Again, this is a flat, flesh-colored, very thick lip that's often covered with hair. And they surround the inner area, which contains the labia minora, which is a smooth, often moist, hairless, more delicate lip. And those are the interior. The space between the two labia minora is called the vestibule. I don't think that's on your list, but it is in your lecture information. Okay, so looking again, we have the clitoris, we have the labia minora, the labia majora, the urethral orifice. The external urethral sphincter for the female is here. The internal urethral sphincter for the female is here. The vaginal orifice, where we would have our greater vestibular bulb, would be along in here. The greater vestibular gland would put its output right about here. And then towards the back, we have the anus. Okay, so now let's look at the last section we're going to talk about, which is the breast. So here is the breast. Looking at it from the front, we have this ring of tissue called the areola. And in the center is the nipple. The nipple is going to contain the openings for the ducts, for the mammary glands. Let's look inside. So the mammary gland itself would be all of this structure. The purple things here are the lobules that would contain the individual parts of the glands. Then we put the milk from the lobules into the black lines. Those are called the lactiferous sinuses. And then they widen at the tip and become those are called lactiferous ducts. When they widen at the tip, they'll be called lactiferous sinuses. And then those lactiferous sinuses each have little holes in the front of the nipple, about 15 to 20 of them. So the whole structure is the mammary gland, lobules, lactiferous ducts, lactiferous sinuses, and nipple. Okay, so that about covers the female reproductive system.